allow me to give some time to finish your tea.
Thank you.
In the meantime, yes, I have lots of questions. In the meantime, I want to highlight that ARM supported the first multicore worlds through a gentleman called Herman Heusser, who maybe some of you heard about it. Herman Heusser, one of the founders of ARM, who happens to be married to a New Zealander.
Yep.
As we do. Maybe you don't know that Dave Jagger from ARM, maybe you heard that name or not, he lives 5 minutes from the Christchurch airport, or used to. So in 2016, he did the closing keynote telling the story how he started the ARM Center in Austin. Are you ready for questions?
Sure.
Julian.
Yeah, there's a lot of talks in the C++ community about introducing safe C++. How does the work that you've done could kind of help move that stuff around? And I've heard that Google has tried to implement bounce checking using compiler changes, basically, with a slight performance drop. So
yeah.
Just asking how that comes together.
Yeah, I mean, obviously one of the key things here is, we're adding additional features to the processor. And obviously that's an impediment to deployment because you do need new hardware. But it does end up being very efficient. Obviously you can, and in fact, they also do this in Rust. I mean, with Rust, they statically check things where they can, but they also introduce a lot of dynamic checks. You could do similar things with C. We've seen similar things with Java as well. It should do a lot of checks. We've also discovered, for instance, with Java, working with one of my colleagues at King's College London, he demonstrated that an awful lot of Java compilers just don't do the checks because it hurts performance. And I think that's the problem. On our superscalar processor, with some checks, you can exploit instruction level parallelism. So while you're adding additional instructions, with a bit of luck, those additional bounds checks don't hurt performance too much. But nevertheless, you're going to increase the number of instructions due to all of these checks. So I would argue that, if you like, CHERI is sort of a more of an ideal way of going, but it does come with this challenge that you need new hardware.
And another question, is you're talking about security, but I mean, what you're proposing is much more than just security, right? It's detecting any problems in the code related to memory management, right? But if you're talking about a personal computer versus a supercomputer, where I assume security issues are a bit less, they're not publicly available servers, etc.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, supercomputing, I think, is a little bit different, but I think you should still be worried about your integrity of your data and who gets access and so on. Yeah. It's interesting when I've been hearing the talks today, I think people were not so concerned about. I was talking to Andrew from Microsoft, and I did sort of ask him slightly awkward questions around things like supply chain, where they're building big Azure systems. Do they know that all of the components really are genuine, original manufacturer components when they put them in their data centers? Because having talked to some of the people like Navy people, I gather this is a real problem, that they can't always tie down supply chains for Cisco network here and others. I don't know. The problems are numerous and many faceted. Well, I've also been traveling around New Zealand a bit, so I might. I managed to spend a chunk of January traveling around. I'll just put a few photos up while I answer questions.
Well, that's my backyard.
The other questions.
Yes, it's Balance.
So I worked on Linux in the past, and it was always really fun to see this, debate between the microkernel versus monolithic kernel people.
Yeah.
And this looks like the perfect match to the microkernel architecture. So I'm wondering, did you do any evaluation porting a microkernel to this?
Yeah. We've not thoroughly looked at that. I mean, we have looked at CHERI for SEL4, for real-time operating systems. A lot of the work's been on FreeBSD, and many of the components of FreeBSD get pulled into things like macOS and others. We haven't really done sort of full microkernel work, but it would be interesting.
Can I highlight that you should be in touch with a speaker from Multicore World 2013, Paul Henning-Kamp, FreeBSD, or
yeah. Well, my colleague Robert Watson has been president of the FreeBSD Foundation, so I think he knows a lot of the.
Yeah. And of course, Gernot Heiser, a speaker in 2014 and 2020 about SEL4. And there is also a New Zealand startup called CRI10 or CRI10, which is working on top of SEL4. So, yeah, little news. So when I say that we have an ecosystem, there is some fundamentals for that. So, yeah, I'm just waiting for another question in between. And no more questions about architecture? Are you happy with what you buy, what you eat? All right, so please join me thanking Simon for the fantastic presentation.